And the comedian I'm talking about is Sinbad. This is the comedian that inspired me to start comedy. As a child, I remember that sounded so old. Oh, as a child back in my day. But I remember he had specials on Comedy Central, and he had a special called Afros and Bell Bottoms. And I just remember seeing him perform on stage in like a jumpsuit, and he was acrobatic almost. He was talking about his own life. He was animated. He was undeniably funny, and he looked like he was just having fun in everything he does. I think that's one of the key takeaways I want to share with you just about Sinbad is in anything he does, he is having fun. If you watch him in his movies, if you watch him when he plays music, if you watch him in his interviews, and if you watch him on stage, when you watch him on stage, which I do recommend you do, which you can find on YouTube, he is always bringing energy, he is always bringing the fun, and he is always bringing himself. That's a question I get asked a lot about from younger comedians is, how do I find my voice? How do I find material ideas? How do I get funnier? And a lot of this all boils down to you talking about things that excite you. You writing material about topics, about observations, about life experiences, about stories. Whatever you want to write about, make sure it's based on things that excite you. And that's something you can see in Sinbad's work is he is excited to be doing whatever it is he is doing. And this guy doesn't just do stand-up. I mentioned a few of the other things he did is acting, and he's a musician, and he does a lot of different things, even within stand-up, of not only just a killer storyteller and performer, but also real talk, maybe the best crowd work comedian you're going to see. And I know crowd work's a hot topic and something a lot of comics want to learn about. So that's probably the second takeaway I want you to get as I'm talking about Sinbad here is number one, he's always having fun. And number two, study his crowd work. A lot of comics are doing crowd work from the mindset, from the point of view of, oh, let me do crowd work to try to get a clip, or let me try to do crowd work to get something from this audience member. Let me try to force something out of them. But you will be surprised, and if you watch Sinbad, he is a master at this. He's not doing crowd work to try to get something from the audience. He's actually trying to give, and he's actually listening, and he's actually opening up the opportunity for the audience member to have a authentic connection with him. He's not trying to get anything from the audience, but actually give the audience an opportunity to connect with him. So watch his crowd work. Netflix did a compilation of some of his top crowd work clips that you can see on YouTube. Undeniably funny. You want to hear laughter, go watch a Sinbad special, and it is just lights out. So, number one, he's always having fun. Number two, his crowd work is next level. It's not crowd work in the sense of trying to get something from the audience, but he's actually trying to give the audience an opportunity to have an authentic, in the moment connection with him and being sincere in that. And number three, he's also clean. Now, I'm not saying all comics need to be clean. I'm not saying if you're not clean, you're doing it wrong or whatnot. What I am saying is this is a comedian at a very high level who also happens to be clean. This isn't something you watch him and be like, oh, wow, that was funny for clean. Or you're not even thinking as you're watching him, oh, wow, he's clean. Wow, very cool. You're just in the moment appreciating his comedy. And it just so happens to be clean. And it just so happens to be authentic to him and his comedic voice. And I think what I have learned from I've done 5 clean comedy workshops now that have all sold out. So that's 50 students. And me being a professional clean comedian for over 14 years, what I've learned from being a practitioner and now a teacher of clean comedy is it's more accessible than people think, which is the big thing we've talked about with Sinbad is that he's authentically himself at all times. And that is really showing now with his stroke that he recently had, and just the outpour that the comedy community has shown him and the love that they have shown him. And he has a fundraiser going on that I will link in the description of this episode as well if you would like to donate to his cause and his stroke recovery. I actually have his action figure right here, which this was part of a fundraiser they did during the pandemic, because he had a stroke a few years ago, and he was actually hot breath insight. He was actually going to do the podcast. We were actually working on scheduling the podcast to do the interview with Sinbad. Real talk. This is my guy. This is my favorite comedian. If you hear any OG comics, they will all agree Sinbad is one of just the pound for pound best comics to ever live. And in my opinion, the best. He's my number one. So I just wanted to show love, as he's getting a lot of well-deserved love, but I think he deserves more. So if you feel inspired by watching Sinbad and learning from what he's done, then please pay it forward. Share it with other people. Let's really let's show this cat some love. He's done a lot for comedy, for young comics, for really a trailblazer in the industry as well, of diversifying his comedic skills beyond just stand-up, but into a bunch of different avenues. So this is a comic well worth your time, well worth watching. That is my shout out for this week for young comics to learn from, is comedian Sinbad.